Thank you, first of all, for indulging Marcia and me with this year's program theme to examine what art is. We took to heart Donna Merck's idea to think outside the box. Our inspiration came from a little book from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York called Art Is. Art is practice. Art is mastery. Art is fierce and art is tender. Art is rendered and art is stitched. Art is hidden and art is seen. Art is skill and art is chance. Program presenters ask Guild members and guests to observe, to debate, and to develop their own definition of what art is. We began with an indigenous perspective to follow the well-traveled conclusion of Dakota Modern, The Art of Oscar Howe. Lakota Elder, Art Museum board member, and poet and writer Leniko Lee described her practice of using art to become a good ancestor. Next, we saw how art is a universal language of dance, with Madeline Scott talking about her vision for the newly formed South Dakota Ballet. In November, Nancy Lyons took us on a delightful exploration of art as wearable fashion. And just as temperatures dropped in January, Carol Rogers with the Vera Health, warmed our spirits to describe how art is medicine for the soul when art is used in healthcare. Croix Shelsta, SDSU Prairie Repertory Theater's own master of set design, delighted us in February with a deep dive into all that goes into creating the skeleton that forms the background for plays. Last month, through abstract, non-representational view, Jennifer Stone talked to us about how she uses mixed media. Jennifer came from Marcia's hometown of Watertown. So today, for our final program, I hope you'll humor me to feature an artist whose formative years were set in my hometown, Flandreau. In fact, I lost track of Patty Campbell, who lived across the alley from me when we were growing up. She's a few years younger than I, but we were close enough playmates to build forts using blankets clothespin to metal lines strung across her backyard. And even though Patty was one of the first in our neighborhood to get a Barbie with multiple outfits and pointy, high-heeled plastic shoes, she was still willing to craft mud pies in the slatted wood playhouse in my backyard. Fast forward a few decades when I saw on the master porthole called Facebook this incredible plein air painting by an artist named Patricia Duncan. I realized that the producer of those finely formed, beautifully painted images was the same mud pie making Barbie fashion girl who lived across my childhood alley. She's now based out of Bone Lake, Wisconsin, where she enjoys the calm beauty of her forested surroundings rather than the sentinel poplar trees that were seen in backyards of the 1960s. In the comfort of her own backyard, she brings aspiring artists to retreats for folks looking at opportunities to step out of their comfort zone to make discoveries of the world around them. And she takes her paints with her on travels around the world to make sure that she is fed by the newly found observations of what she encounters. It's that nature that comes carefully to noticing what's around her every day that makes Patricia Duncan the perfect conclusion to our year of examining what art is. Won't you please join me in welcoming Patty home to tell us why art is plein air painting in her pursuit of healing. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, first of all, welcome everybody. I sure appreciate that you came today. And, you know, I didn't quite know what to expect. And honestly, I'm out of my comfort zone talking to bigger groups of people. When I normally teach, I just have small groups, and I do that purposely because I really like to get acquainted with people on a very personal level. So, you know, whenever I host any kind of classes and or retreats, 2 or 3 day retreats, it gives me more opportunities to get to know people much better. So
Just a little bit of, well, I also want to say thank you, Jeannie and Caroline, and everybody that's helped put this together, because this is amazing. So thank you. And I want to give you a little bit of history. I know it was I think it was in the paper about sort of growing up in Plein, South Dakota. My first experience when I knew I loved art was with my second grade teacher. Her name was Molly Cade, and she knew I couldn't wait to come in from recess. I'd sit right down in the front row, and she taught me how to do that grid drawing. I don't know if any of you remember doing that, where they're like 1-inch squares, and we learned how to do portraits, learned how to do landscapes, we learned how to do animals, and flowers, all kinds of things. So I loved all of that. That was just kind of my thing. And I think during the elementary school years, you always get art along the way throughout the elementary years. And then when I went into high school, when my father moved his business to Sioux Falls, I went to O'Gorman High School. And I did have art for, 9th through 12th grade. And that particular teacher, who was a nun, had taught us also to work from life. So she always had still life set up. And it was we didn't go outside and do plein air. I hadn't had that experience yet, but it was a really good experience just working from life. It's the same thing doing still lives as it would be going outside in nature. So anyway, that was it. And then also in Flandreau, I was exposed to ballet through Nabora Adams. I don't know if you people remember her, remember the name. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. And so I've just always been a big proponent of the arts. I can't imagine going through life without it. It's like it helps sustains me, it fills my soul. And so I've always been involved in the performing arts of the ballet until after I met up with my husband, Kimmy Duncan, from Flandreau. And then we had a family of 5 children, and it took us abroad for 4 years. And I spent a lot of time with them and their activities and, their growing up years. And I have no regrets about any of that. But I did get back into the drawing and painting. Let's see, I think our oldest son was a junior in high school. And I also decided at that time I needed to kind of pursue this a little bit more. It was starting to kind of spur in me, and I knew I had to kind of plan for ahead when the kids were going to be gone. And so anyway, I started taking it at the Edina Art Center, and I had some really fantastic teachers there. And then I think that was 1998. And then by 2007, I decided to get into oil painting, which I had never done before. Never picked up a oil painting set or brushes or anything. And I found a gentleman in downtown St. Paul that had a studio, and his studio mate, they both taught, he taught plein air, landscape plein air painting. And his studio mate taught life drawing from still lives and portrait work. So I immersed myself. I think I told Dave this last night. I told them, my instructor, I'm standing on the edge of the cliff, and I feel like I'm just going to jump in and see what happens. So I felt like that was the time to do it, and I'm not going to hold back. Were there difficult times, and I wanted to quit, but I stuck with it. I knew that there would be something good that would come from the experience. So that's when I, started to develop much more of a passion for the painting. And there's a couple more events that happened that were very significant events. Back in 2010, we lost our 27-year-old daughter, Abby. And she had some very serious mental health issues. And so it was a really difficult time for both Ken and I and for our family. But somehow you get through all of that. And then I also had gone through some training through Alfred Adler. There's a graduate school in the Twin Cities. And there's a gentleman that had done a lot of his training through that and then taught. So he hosted not only workshops, but then I went through a period of 2 years of training with him and some other women. And it was really a good experience because it gave me a real holistic approach to life. It's not about putting labels on people. It's more spiritual, and I liked that component. And so, and it had a lot more, I don't know, it just felt like it had more meaning and significance in my life. And so I've carried on with that throughout the rest of my life. I can't imagine not having that as part of my life. So it's worked really well for me personally. And I think when I teach the, workshops or classes, I try to incorporate some of those skills that I've learned to pass along to other people, and whether they find it helpful or not, that's up to them. But it truly has made a difference in my life. So anyway, that's just a little bit more of a history of, my experiences with the arts. And as I said, I've kind of found my passion now. And I feel like it's kind of taken me in a way that I had no idea I would be using it to help others. I don't know if I could look back on any significant, but I would say that the start of losing our daughter and through that whole path was really a struggle. And I had to work through all of that. And I think art became my voice. It was a way to share that with other people. So anyway, a couple of things that I wanted to just mention about that. In my retreats, one of the things that I focus a lot on is iterative listening. And it seems to be a skill that is really hard for people, I think, to develop the skills to really listen. We're always kind of thinking ahead and what we're going to respond and say to other people, but taking the time to listen and pay attention to other people and what they have to say, helps them feel valued and helps them feel important. So anyway, then let's see. So a couple things that I introduce in it is the talking stick. Is anybody familiar with that? The talking stick? That's a Native American tradition. And I found out about it, I think it was the museum in Rapid City, South Dakota. We kind of learned more about that. And we introduced it to our families. So whenever we have family meals or whatever, we can use that when we feel like the grandchildren need more time to have a voice in what they have to say. Or, so it is kind of a nice little tool to use with people. And then the other thing that I found very interesting, there's an African tribe that uses it's called Sawubona. And it is a Zulu greeting that means I see you. It is more than politeness, as Sawubona carries the importance of recognizing the dignity and worth of each person. It says, I see the whole of you, your experiences, your passions, your pain, your strengths and weaknesses, and your future. You are valuable to me. The African tribe members have a common response, which is Shiboka, which means I exist for you. They are more than greetings, as they are ways to vitalize the other person by giving full attention and presence, communicating how much value they carry within themselves. So, I just feel like there's so much that we learn from, not only from each other, but just think about these tribes and other cultures in different parts of the world and what we can gain from their experiences and how we can maybe incorporate that into some of our lives too, to make it a little bit better. So going on, there's a lot more that I cover with regards to the wellness retreats, which reminds me, let's see, I have some of these here, and these are brochures that kind of go into a little bit more description about the wellness retreats. And you're welcome to take them or, pass them around, whatever you like to do. I'll just give one to Jeannie. Maybe pass it around. This picture here, you can, and I've got it all set up here. I just wanted to go into some more of the plein air painting, but this is my gear that I use when I go out to paint outside on location. And that's typically what I'll wear. I always have an apron on because I get very dirty. It's those mud pies that I used to make. And this is this is a pastel set. I also work in oils. So I have a different tripod and box for that. And I think in this particular scene, we were in Maine. Is that right? Yeah. So anyway, that just kind of gives you an idea, but just a quick question. Does everybody know and understand what plein air is? Okay, so anybody want to take a guess? No? Well, it's a French term for working outside on location. So, I consider myself more of a representational painter. So when I go outside, I'm going to look for something that draws me in. I'm trying to find a focal point. So that focal point might be, a scene like this. Like I said, this is in Maine. It might be something with a lot of water in it, a lot of pine trees. And then the second part of that I always look for is, well, actually, there's two parts. I'm looking for the composition and the design of the painting. That becomes really important to consider that as you map it out. And then the third part of that is the light source, where it's coming from. So for example, on any given day, I might go from 9 to 12 in the morning, and I'll do a plein air painting in that 2 to 3 hour span, take a break for lunch, and then in the afternoon, it'll be from like 1 to 4. And then sometimes people will do nocturne paintings. So I've done a few of those, but that's kind of tough. So, and then let's see, what else with the, with the painting. Well, there's a lot of information that I'll share with you when I sit down and start working on this a little bit. So I find a lot of inspiration just on our property up in Wisconsin, but I also prefer working, going to see some of the old barns that are around the area that are starting to fall down. And it's nice if you can get a chance to paint some of those, and then you've captured something in history, right? And I think the other aspect of the plein air painting that I really love when I've been in different plein air events is talking to people. So people will come up and ask you questions. They want to know more about it, or they want to tell you more of the history or the story behind the place that you're painting. And that always is an added bonus and benefit to being outside and painting when there's other people around. Now, do I also paint inside? Yes, I do. And I would use photographs in the winter. I think the coldest I painted outside was 18 degrees. So that was the coldest, and I can't say I want to do that too much more. So, but I do like snow scenes a lot. They're the way the light hits the snow, the different colors that you see. There can be pinks, there can be purples, there can be blues, and I'm not imagining this. I mean, you can actually see this when the light is hitting it a certain way. So anyway, and then, so getting into this a little bit more, I started out with a little, it's just a little 9x12 panel. And so in pastels, there's I guess the other thing I should mention is, have they ever seen pastels, or do you know what they're made of? So some people have. So the pastels is like a pure pigment. It's like a powder, and then it's held together by a binder. And then they make them into sticks. They make them into pastel pencils. So there's all kinds of tools and things that you can use with the pastel. As a matter of fact, I think coming up it's actually June 10th, I leave for a convention down in Albuquerque. And it's called the IAPS, International Association of Pastel Societies. So there's all these societies that gather from all over the world, and they come to Albuquerque. And so for a full week, you can take mini workshops, you can watch demonstrations, you can go to their trade show, and they have many other activities kind of going on during the week, which is really fun for a lot of the people to gather, because a lot of the same people go every other year to this thing. Let's see, another little tool that I might mention. This is called a viewfinder. I put this on so I can have it on my neck so I don't lose it. But this is actually, let's see, it gets a little bit stuck. Hold on just a second here, so I can get it apart. So what this is, as you can tell, I've had this on it. There's little markings on the side of it. So when I'm out in nature, if there's an awful lot of information, which there always is, it's a great way to kind of narrow down the amount of information that you want to paint. So it can, I think for a lot of people who are just new at it, what I encourage them to do is I take a small, like a sketchbook with a pencil and a kneaded eraser, and then I have them go out and find something that's fairly simple. No, don't try to take on the whole world. You just pick a small area and focus on that. And there's a couple things that I have them consider. Well, I really want everyone, when they're learning this, it's hard to have people paint what they love, because it takes a while to kind of develop that part of the painting experience. But I try to have them keep it really simple with 3 S's. They're called simplify. Second is to squint. And the third is to see. So you're developing this scope of awareness as you go out in nature and paint. And I think that was the big eye-opening experience for me personally when I started was, your scope of awareness is like this when you start. So it's pretty limited. But then as you start to look more closely at nature, you just start to see things on a much deeper level that you never saw before. And so a lot of the students will come to me and they'll say, oh my gosh, when I was driving home today, I saw this and I never paid any attention. I used to just drive right by it, So I just think it starts to develop this level of awareness that you just never had before. So if you can do that and help people see that, it's, I feel like they're meeting with some success, And so, but the sketchbook is a really handy tool. And a lot of times I can take it with me everywhere I go, but I really encourage the students to do it on their own as well, besides just in the workshops or the classes. And then, let's see, the things that I look for when I'm out in nature is, let's just say it's a very clear, bright, sunny day. I will look for a lot of contrast. So when I say looking for contrast, I'm talking about the darks and the lights. So you're going to have, for example, let's see, actually, I should use this now, right? I'm learning how to use this too. So let's see. It will go. Maybe it won't go. It's the down arrow, right? All right. It's a blue light. So does that mean anything? No. Maybe I'm just not quite hitting. It's very. For some reason, it's like, okay. So we get into some of the landscapes. So this is on our property up in Wisconsin. And Ken has made all these trails so we can go off into the trails and find places to paint. But I'm always attracted to paths. I have this thing about paths because I'm always curious, where is this going to go? Where is this going to lead me? And this was a fall day, and this is a bigger painting. I didn't bring any bigger ones here, and it's 24 by 30. And so usually with the smaller paintings, like the little oil painting in the woods or this one down by the lake, those are 9 by 12, 11 by 14. And you can do a small study like that in one sitting. So you can, 9 to 12 or 1 to 4 or whatever time that you start that and pretty much finish. I might do a little touch up in the studio, but most of the time I finish it right on location. Otherwise, in this situation where it was a 24 by 30, I started out with one afternoon doing this. And I think I spent somewhere between 3 and 4 hours. I went back the next day because it was going to be really nice. Spent the same amount of time. I luckily had the same light. It was really good. And so I was able to, get this finished. And so there really wasn't much to do with the painting after that. So I've entered this into a few different shows. It's down in a museum down in Arizona right now. Going to be in a show down there. But I'm starting to work a little bit larger in both my oils and my pastels. But I think the nice part about it when you do the small studies is you can enlarge them. So if you have people that are interested in something being larger, that you can certainly do that. Let's see. And then with going back to the values. So on this, let's see if this little, I'll try that. Yeah, that does work. Okay. Oh, you did that. Okay. I'm so glad you're here. So, these paintings came out, but I guess, they're a little bit lighter. So if you go to the original painting, that would be, excuse me, this one right here. If one of the things that I would point out with this is that this is all the shadows that are closer to you, that are more in the foreground, are always going to be darker. The values are going to be darker. So you want to make sure that those get darker. This is up against the grass. And again, here's another path that goes through there. And there's some darker values in the distance, but if you notice the difference between those, they're not quite as dark. So it's really understanding the value relationships as you're working on a piece, and it goes further off in the distance and the values become less and less. And in fact, some of the mountains like out in Arizona or other places, they are just kind of this beautiful blue color because they're so off in the distance and there isn't any shift in the values because they're so far away. It's really fun to look at that. So anyway, and then similar here, this is, I'm sitting right in this area and there's some shadows with this as well. And so some of this, this value underneath the grasses here, that's not getting any kind of direct light. So that's all going to be in a dark value. And then as it comes up, you get into what they call a mid-tone value. So it's still a little bit darker. And then when you get to the top, that's all the light values. That's the light is hitting, same thing here. See, if you notice the shift in the background, this is a landmass across the lake. That's much lighter than what's going on in here. And this is another island in between. So you have to be always paying attention to those values. They actually are more important than the color. So people go, what? They don't believe that, but it's true. You want your values to help tell the story. So these two are oil paintings. This is just a path in the woods. Similar kind of thing. There was more light in just the path and then the woods here at the top, but the rest are a little bit darker values. This has a little bit more of an impressionistic kind of sense to it. And this one's got some of that, but it's also got realism. This is the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. So, and this is an oil painting. So these two are oil paintings and these two are pastels. Let's see. I think, and this is the very same path, but do you see how they're different? That one's the oil, and this is the pastel. And well, you can kind of see the dark value in here, but I was sitting right back in this area here, and so it gets a little bit lighter as it goes up towards the sky. And then the other thing that I do pay attention to when I'm painting outside is the sky. If it's a really clear day, you might have, well, there's a shift. There's a prismatic shift with the sky color. So it starts out with kind of a manganese blue, or it's kind of got more green in it as it's closer to the horizon line. And then as it shifts up, it goes into more of a cobalt blue. And then from a cobalt blue, it goes up to French ultramarine. So it's just amazing. When you go out and take a look at that sky, you probably start to notice some of that. So that's why I thought it was really important. That's just one thing that you can kind of notice a little bit more of when you see on a clear day, the sky colors. So that's always, important parts of the plein air experience. Let's see. Was there anything else? Oh, also when this is another big thing. When you're starting a plein air painting, so in this situation, foundationally, you want to have a really good drawing. So that's why the practice on doing the, you know, the little sketchbook is always a good experience because you're constantly drawing and you're seeing more things. And then the other thing that when I talk to my students about simplifying, it's really important to take a look at the shapes. So if you can see shapes of dark values, shapes of the lighter values, and simplify that way, that's a good way to start, you know, doing your plein air painting. So I wish I could try it again. Let's try it and see if it will work now. Let's see. There. So this one has a little bit more. You can kind of see some of these darker values in the foreground here. This also is a 24 by 30 painting in the woods. It took me a couple days to come back at the same time of day. And yeah, there's something about the woods. I think well, one of the most valuable things that I've received from nature is when I'm out in it. It's the quiet. It's sort of a form of meditation. It's a way to let go of things that maybe are, you know, a little bit more troubling at the time. So I can go ahead and I can set myself up, and I consider it more of a sacred space. To me, it's really important that this is my time, and that's what I'm going to treat it. It's almost like a form of prayer for me personally. And then it's, you know, taking my time as I go through the process and focusing all of this. And so the other aspect of that is with my students, I tell them, don't worry so much about your outcome as you just enjoy the process. And isn't that something we can all apply to anything in our life? We just have to kind of sit back and enjoy where we're at, what's happening in our life, you know, and, you know, take life as it comes that way. So anyway, these are all really good ways to kind of, this ended up being a little bit, you know, darker in here on this image in this, you know, painting, but actually in real life, I didn't bring the painting along. I do have it back in Wisconsin. It gets much lighter as it goes back. And then these little areas right through here that you see, those are all sky holes. So I put those in, and usually those sky holes are a little bit darker in value because they're just in the within the trees. And then when you get up to the top part, like up in these areas, those become a little bit lighter. So yeah. Anyway. So is there any questions about any of this at this point? I mean, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
How realistic, I mean, if I would go set the setting, would it look a lot like that?
Well, I added a little. Right. No, that's a really good question. I think in this situation, the thing that I was drawn to was, more importantly, this was kind of my focal point. I loved the roots of this tree. I felt like it told a story. You know, that's really important to me, that there is something that motivates me to paint that scene. And then, of course, the path that goes back into the woods. And then you just see the way the ambient light kind of comes through the trees. You know, there's a lot of it just kind of popping through. It hits at different times of the, you know, day that they're, and obviously you have to work pretty quickly because the light shifts so much. But if you can sort of freeze that light effect by getting some of your bigger shapes in the dark values and keep the light, you know, shapes in there, then you can actually, some people don't even finish their plein air painting. They'll take it inside and finish it that way. And so, but I like to be out there and try to finish it right there. But that was a really good question. So I think that, you know, it's up to the artist. You get to edit. It's your artistic privilege to kind of, it's your personality coming through in that work, in the work that you do. I would consider, if I put a label, so to speak, on myself, I'm much more of I have a real gentle approach to how I paint. And I can demonstrate some of that on this little painting that I'm doing. So it's and different students come to me and they might have a little bit heavier hand, which is fine. So what I ask them to think about when they're painting is try to think about how you can use both. There's places where you can be a little bit more bold, a little more heavy-handed, and the other places you might have just a little bit lighter touch. So I think that's partly what you learn as you go through the process of painting outside. But yeah, nature gives us wonderful gifts, so much beauty. And I think you know, the things that you think, oh, I don't really see much in that, but when you go out there, it's sometimes the most mundane things can be the most beautiful. So you just start to look at life a little bit different. Yes.
Do you ever paint the same scene?
Yep.
Over and over, different lights?
And different light, and then also just, it comes out differently. There's no two paintings that would ever be alike, but yes, that's actually, who's the artist? There's an artist in
Monet.
Yes, thank you. He did. It's hard. And he, you know, I think that's the beauty there. It's everywhere and you don't have to go very far to see it. It's in your own backyard. People always think they have to go to the Grand Canyon or they got to go all these other places, but really there's so much right around you. So were you going to say something else? I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think you painted the cathedral 50 times or something.
Yes.
Same view, different
Yep.
lights.
Yeah, well, and do the seasonal. So you could have a winter painting, you can have a fall scene, you can have a summer and a spring. And obviously they're going to all look differently, but they're, or different, but they're, yeah, it's a fun way to do it. I think it's great. So yes.
You say you always finish yours, but if you're not going to get it finished, do you ever take a photograph of it?
Of course, that's a really good one. Good question too. I think it's important that when you're on site, one of the first things I encourage people to do, they don't, you know, some of us forget to do that. We're too excited to be out there. So is to just take a photo of the scene that you're painting. And then you have that as a reference. And that's helpful for a lot of people when especially when they're first starting out. You know, they might only get so far and that's okay. And then they can come in and they can work on it again. And maybe they push it to as far as they think they can go with it. And then they're ready to try something new. So, you know, like I said, the biggest part of the experience is to just appreciate and enjoy the process of going through it and don't worry so much about the outcome. You know, that will come. It just takes time to sort of acquire some of the skills. But I use the example. I mean, there were times when I first started plein air, I was like, I just want to quit. This is too hard. But it's like, I knew that there'd be some reward if I stuck with it to kind of, or just, how do I say this? Embrace it, even during the frustration. And it's okay to feel frustrated because there's a lot of things in life that, you know, will do that to us. But I think it's the stick-to-itness, you know, seeing it through. Yes. Oh, yes.
I've been to a couple of plein air events as a spectator.
Okay.
And just question about the rules of engagement with the artists. Like, do they expect you to visit with them? You know, how does that?
Yeah.
I don't really know what the
protocol is for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it was a really good experience. One of my experiences in the plein air events that I've been in over the years, I feel like most of the artists don't mind having people come up and ask questions, and they're curious about what you're doing. Oh yeah, you're here for the plein air event. Mm-hmm. You know, where are you from? They want to know all of that. And so I don't hesitate to do that because I feel like that's another way to educate people about plein air. Some people don't know anything about it, and that's okay. So I kind of want, and then you can engage in a conversation to kind of introduce them to the idea of it. And you never know when it might interest somebody, you know.
How about your kids or grandkids? Are they involved in any of that?
Yeah, so I painted with all of them when they were younger. And then of course now the oldest is like 16 and the youngest is 9. And none of them do it because sports took over. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's what their friends are doing and they're with their friends. But I think they still there's still an interest, and at least I feel like they've been exposed to it, and they kind of know, they've learned some things when they were younger, because we always had different projects we were working on. I even, one of my granddaughters loved the plein air, so we'd sit out and she would do a lot of what I was doing, and that was a great way for her to learn. And I think she was probably 7 or 8. So it was really, I don't know, you just never know when you're going to spark something in, whether it's kids or other adults. And so I think that's what I like about it, or I love about it. But yeah, good.
After you take it home,
Yes.
are there times when you maybe mess around with it too much?
That would be my other S. Stop. So I would have you have the simplify, find something that's simple, because you can make that really beautiful. You have being able to see, so your scope of awareness continues to expand as you do more. And then, you have also at that point, you want to just stop. You can overwork a painting. It's easy to do. So another very good question. Wow. So I'm curious, how many people maybe do some art right now? Okay, so raise your hands a little higher. I want to see. I think it's great. So are you doing it on your own, or are you doing it in classes, or? Oh, okay. How about? Both. Excellent. Okay. So are you enjoying the experience of it?
I'm in 4 classes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and I think that, sometimes the community programs, community ed, or some of those are really good opportunities to get, first it's a community event. There's other people coming in, they're interested in the same thing. And then you have the whole learning environment that you're learning from each other and the instructor. But yeah, that's a great place to start too. So yeah. And that's where I didn't go to art school, so to speak. The only art school I would consider more of an art school was those instructors in St. Paul. Yeah, exactly. St. Paul, Minnesota. It is a far way, but there's workshops that you could sign up for and maybe go to some of those and have that experience. And, I think at this stage in our life, it's really important to take risks, step off the edge of that cliff, so to speak, and try some of these, right? Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Just 2 questions.
Sure.
First is, have you had a session where you had a humanities scholar, like you're an art scholar, co-teach so that there was writing as well as?
I would love that. I think that would be really great. That's a great idea. I think, Jeannie, do you want to mention about
Years ago, we did something with Gary Steinley and Dave Evans. Dave Evans was the poet that had people come together. We went out to Oak Lake and did a session, and Gary did the painting part of it that the students had. So there are opportunities. That was many years ago, but that's plug to it for an idea for a future.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you. You don't need to do it now, but how do your plein air techniques transfer to figure drawing?
Oh, very well. Actually, I think that's the other part that I want to try to do more of. At one point I was doing the portrait work, but I also was in figure drawing classes. So we would have live models, and that is a great way to improve your drawing skills, because you're under a time limit. So we would start out with a 20-minute spell of doing drawings of like a nude figure, and it would be 1-minute sketches, and then we go to 5 minutes, and then we go to 10 minutes, and then we go to a full 20 minutes. But learning from the human body is probably one of the most difficult, I think, because you want to try to get the gesture, the essence of that person. So it becomes really, really important to learn from the experience. Yes.
I just want to say there is a life drawing group at the Brookings Arts Council in Brookings.
Okay.
Every other Wednesday.
Oh.
So there is opportunities for people to get involved with that.
Well, that's good. And then maybe, letting them know that they can advertise that or let other people know about it. It's a great way to learn how to improve your drawing skills. And I think those were very formative times for me when I got to be in those sketch groups. I miss it, but I mean, I'd like to do it again, but I haven't. We're kind of more out in the rural area, so I don't see that happening too much. So anyway, is there any other questions from anybody? I don't want to leave anybody out. Yes.
What brand of pastels do you use?
Oh, those are great questions. So are you a pastel artist or do you?
Like that.
You have. So do you remember or do you know some of the types that you have currently? Like Rembrandt? Okay. I think that's one that I started. And then the other part of the pastels is knowing the type of pastel that you're working with. There's, I mentioned pastel pencils. So that's doing more finer detailed work. There's new pastel, which is more like a stick, and that's kind of a hard pastel. Rembrandt is kind of more on that end of it being a little bit of a harder pastel, but I usually break mine in half or into smaller pieces, and then I can use the whole side of the pastel. And then there, Sennelier, yep, that's another one. That's a really good one. There's my favorite right now is Terry Ludwig. He just passed away, but his son Jeff has taken over the business, and he's out of Colorado. But you can get a lot of those resources through Dakota Art Pastels, which is out in the state of Washington. And they have, oh my gosh, they have everything. I mean, it's like I said, it's like a candy store. There's unisons, there's, you know, all kinds. Yes.
You paint pastels on canvas?
Yeah, so that was the other thing that I was going to show you. So there's different substrates that you can get. So this is, and I might just want to pass, actually, I wonder if I've got another one. Excuse me. There's a, these are mounted, and I can mount my own, or I can order them this way. So this is like a definite size of like a 11 by 14. There's 8 by 10s. So I'll pass those around and just feel the surface of it. It's a sanded surface, so it really absorbs the pastel. Excuse me. And there's some more. Let's see. I brought a few more samples. Excuse me, I'm having a little trouble here. I better have some water. I'll pass these around too. This is UArt. So like I said, you can go on the Dakota Art Pastel website and look at it, and I wait for their sales. So they might have some really good sales on the papers or on the products, the pastels. So yeah, there's just a variety of different ones, but you'll see that there's a real tooth, and it really helps graph pastel. So, and I think I want to say, like the oil panels, I pretty much use Source Tech for those. And on my oil panels, like the one at the bottom, this one on the top, I didn't tone it, but I usually don't use a white panel for the oils. I'll tone it with something either like a raw umber with white and some Gamsol. And I just put it over with a cloth so it has a little bit of, it's not a complete white surface. And then the pastels, I will sometimes do a watercolor underpainting. I'll use rubbing alcohol with pastel. I could use oils. I could do a wash with oils underneath it. And then you get this wonderful color vibration. In fact, this one has got purples in it in watercolor, and it has some oranges. You know, I just think it gives it a little bit more depth. So that's why I use that too. So. Oh, okay, that's fine. So just before I go, is there any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
I'm just curious how you finish your pastels.
You know, I don't put any spray fixative on it.
Just under glass.
Yep, just I usually get, I go the museum grade glass. And the reason I do that is because, well, it's more expensive. But if you go to a place like Michael's, they will cut it for you to the size that you want. Then you can also purchase the spacers so it doesn't sit right up against the painting. So it's you know, it's a great way to preserve them. Everything's acid free, so you don't have to worry. Even your substrates, the papers that I'm passing around, you don't have to worry about those. they'll last for a long time. So. Yes, go ahead.
For a complete beginner, in plein air art.
Yeah.
What would you recommend, in terms of medium? Like, would you recommend pastels or oil paints?
You know,
I know
there's,
there are like unique challenges. with
they're
painting
all
outside.
unique. Yeah, no, that's good. I think you know, I started out with more charcoal drawing and then I went to pastels and I feel like it's more of a good segue to get into oil painting. Acrylics are great too for outside, but they dry so fast. So the oil is nice because that takes probably a good several days to a week for it to dry. And then I put a retouch varnish on the oils so I can actually go back into it if I want to improve something in the painting. So, yes.
All right, this is so mundane, but how do you get this out of your clothes?
You know, I understand that, exactly. Well, the one thing that I have used is is it called Goo Gun? Goo Gun? Yeah, that's a great one for oils. I have tried it in some of my pastels. There was something that somebody told me just recently. You know, I can't recall it.
If you think about it.
I will. Exactly. I would say that Goo Gun works pretty well. I had a student that I had a rug down below that was handmade and she dropped some red paint on it. And it was like, we were on the floor scrubbing trying to get it. And it worked pretty well. It got most of it out. So, and that was you know, it was made by a Mexican artist. And so it was all hand crocheted. It was beautiful, but I don't know why I had it down there. So anyway, oh, well, you learn along the way. Yes.
Have you used the slow drying acrylics?
I have not tried that. And there's also the water oils too, water-based oils. So it would be worth, I haven't tried either of those. So it would be worth trying that, you know. I mean, even if you don't want to jump in and buy a whole bunch of colors, and I don't know what you use for your palette, but like in oils, I've got like 11 colors that I use. So, and I can mix others to get other different varying degrees of greens or whatever. But I think it might be fun to just buy like a very basic red, white, and blue, you know, and start with something like that.
That's what with the slow drying, the drying acrylics, I find the color changes.
Yes.
Acrylics, you change it right away, but the slow drying, you know, I did a painting.
Okay.
I thought I really liked it, and then a couple hours later, you know, I looked at it.
It wasn't what you expected. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah. So I haven't had that experience with the acrylics, so I can't answer that question for you, but I think it's really just, I mean, I know other people that have used acrylics and they've been in plein air events, and I'm always amazed at what they can come out with because they can still get a lot of depth and volume in their work. And I don't know how they do it, honestly, but I think it would just take practice. I'd have to just start using the medium to see how that works because it does dry quickly. So, yeah. But these have been like when I've been in plein air events, I'll switch back and forth between pastel and oil. So I like the change. I'd like to have a little variety. So one day I might do all pastels, the next day I might do all oils. So I like that, being able to kind of mix it up a little bit. So, yeah.
You wear a mask when you.
If I'm inside, I should, but I haven't yet. Some people get those air filter, the big equipment that they put in their studio space, and they use that. But I think, like, I wear gloves now a lot, most of the time when I'm painting, because there's chemicals on those, especially the cadmium oils. Those are really high content. They're toxic. So, yeah. And I'm not trying to discourage people, but I think just keeping yourself safe is a good way to protect yourself. So, anything else you can think of?
You might have to
Finish.
so that we can have the little brief business meetings, but we won't be able to clean up all of her stuff, after the business meeting, so when the business meeting is finished, I'm gonna take her upstairs to just show her a little bit of upstairs too, but she'll be around to talk to, you can look at her things more closely.
Yeah, and I put some here that are all originals from Plein, but all I have is a, like a plastic, it's acid free, but it's to cover them, protect them. So I sometimes do that because people want to frame their own work. And so, but I don't frame everything, or I recycle my frames. So if something, I've had that in there for a while and I'm tired of it, I'm ready to switch it, I stick with my standard sizes and then I can switch it out with another painting. Yes.
If you have more that you can show on the screen, we have like 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know, should I try it? See if it will. Yeah. Okay. So that's this one. I think we tried to pick some of the things that were already in. And it's interesting, do you see how some of the colors are slightly different than in real life? But that's okay. This is that one that's right here off of the lake. And so you can have some fun with color in the shadows, using purples and blues. And I know that's what's really fun. You just get to kind of be a little more creative that way. This is figures. So this was the dancer that I had done. Oh, and that's a bigger painting than a 24 by 30. I can't remember what it is. And that's got a wash underneath it. You can kind of see some of the oranges and purples in it. So that was all watercolor underneath. And then this is a restaurant in downtown Minneapolis called Spoon and Stable. And Ken and I have been to the restaurant, but I like catching some of the chefs in action doing their thing. And so that's what they're doing their prep work for. I don't know if it was dessert or what it was. So, and then painting workshops that goes in. Oh, these are some of the people that have participated in some of the classes. Actually, these 2 people here on the right, or on this left picture, Colleen Gullickson and thank you. Well, Gayleen is painting right now. She's from Iowa. But the other 2, Colleen and Tony are both from South Dakota. So it's fun to have them. And then this is a gal from Wisconsin, and there's some other painters on the other side of her. So let's see what else is in here. Here we are going out into the woods. So we go out in this and we throw all of our stuff in the back of the gator to do that. And then this is a group of people that I let them kind of, we stayed just on the immediate property where the cabin is, and then they just picked out things that were a little more simple. Because I would say that there's 1, 2, 3 of those 4 people had never painted before. So they just were like, okay, we want to try this. So that's always fun to have that happen. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, one's from Minnesota, the other 3 are from Wisconsin, actually 2 from Minnesota. And there they are, the South Dakota and Iowa people. And then we're back to that. So I just put in a few examples, some of the paintings, but anyway, I think that's it. Thank you.